can probably have a Q&A. I mean, you can post your questions also lively then. Okay, and so a very warm welcome to each and every one of you to this panel discussion on a very interesting and a timely topic, building a successful career in academia. And it's a timely topic for at any point in time, because there are ECRs always coming out of PhD who want to start an academic career and want to know how the rules and strategies of the game are. So before getting started, just a quick introduction to myself. I'm Gopalakrishna Narayanamurthy. I'm currently a senior lecturer at University of Liverpool Management School in the Operations and Supply Chain Department. I'm also an alumni of IIM Kozhikode's PhD program, which was then FPM, and I was in the 2012-2018 batch. And so I'll be moderating this panel, and I also thank the organizing committee for giving me this opportunity. So moving on, the panel comprises of three members, three very experienced members, Professor Rajendra Nargunkar, then Professor Neeraj Dwivedi, and Professor Rudra Sen Sarma. All three of them have more than a decade of rich experience at different levels in academic institutions, and also some of them closer to reaching 2 decades of experience. So I'll start introducing the panel members individually. Professor Rajendra is the director of NIMS NMIMS Bangalore campus. He's also a well-known teacher, trainer, consultant, and researcher in the marketing area. He has authored 4 books on service marketing, services marketing, marketing research, international marketing, and brand management. Prior to it, he served as a professor at IIM Lucknow, IIM Kozhikode, IIM Indore, and also as a director at PES Institute of Management, IFIM Business School, and IMT Nagpur. During his tenure, Professor Nargunkar has held the position of dean at both IMT Ghaziabad and IIM Indore. Okay, welcome, sir. Welcome to the panel. Yeah. Then we have Professor Neeraj Dwivedi as our second panel member, who's Dean Faculty and Professor of Strategic Management at IIM Lucknow. He was earlier associated with IIM Indore and IIM Kozhikode. He also worked with the Asian Institute of Technology, Bangkok, as a visiting faculty. His areas of research include corporate governance, internationalization strategies, mergers and acquisitions. Apart from having 18 years of experience in management research and teaching, he had also spent about 6 years in the corporate sector, mainly in the food processing and consulting industry. Welcome, sir, to the panel. Then the third member of the panel is Professor Rudra Sen Sarma, who's a professor of economics at IIM Kozhikode, where he has previously held positions of Dean Research and Internationalization. He has close to 2 decades of research and teaching experience with stints at the RBI, IIM Lucknow, University of Birmingham, and University of Hertfordshire. His areas of research are monetary policy, banking, and development finance. Welcome, Professor Rudra, to the panel. Okay, so as you could see, the panel is also diverse in terms of their area focus, the department focus. Like members from Professor Rajendra is from marketing, Professor Neeraj is from strategic management, and Professor Rudra is from economics, and I know to some extent about operations and supply chain. So we come from diverse area specialization also. So the attendees can also ask area-specific questions if you think that will help you in terms of progressing and taking forward an academic career in those areas. And as I mentioned before, please use the chat box for posing the questions. So the structure is the moderated panel discussion, which is kind of more kind of discussion with the panel members, is planned for 60 minutes, and then the panel will take questions from the attendees for the remaining time, close to 30 minutes. So that's the high-level structure we have. So that's where we started. So if everything is fine, we can get into the actual discussion itself. So the order is Professor Rajendra for the first question, and then Professor Neeraj, and then Professor Rudra could add to it based on the responses that has been already provided. So firstly, I would request the panel members to shed some light on what is unique about a career in academia. And we also have panel members who had both career in corporate and in academia. So it'll be interesting to know from your experience what is so unique about a career in academia, especially for someone who's going to start getting into such a career. Professor Rajendra, over to you.
Okay, let me give you my perspective on this issue or question. By and large, people, when they complete a master's in any area of management, don't necessarily think of an academic career. They are focused on a corporate career most of the time. So in my case, also, I think the same pattern held, and I had a corporate job for a couple of years after my PGDM from Bangalore, IMB at that time, 84. I did not seriously think of academics as a career, at least then. But an opportunity came along, and I got a scholarship or a teaching assistantship to go to the US for a PhD, thanks to some friends who were already there and some groundwork that they did maybe. And thought, why not? Let me give it a shot, and incidentally, I'll also see the world. Those days, I think that was not so easy to hop onto a flight and travel anywhere, because firstly, we couldn't afford it. Secondly, you needed some support system even if you landed there. So since I was fortunate to have a scholarship, I went for a PhD first, and then found that the PhD basically taught us how to become a good academician. So naturally, what followed was an academic job, first in the US, just after my PhD there, and then coming back, continued with it. So what I have found is that with whatever little corporate experience that I've had, also lots of my friends who have been and remained in the corporate sector, is that first and foremost, the academic job provides you with autonomy, which is unmatched, in my opinion, unmatched by any corporate job, including that of the CEO, if you get there. Autonomy is important to some people, and I think if it is important to you, I think being in academia is generally a good idea compared to anything else. The second unique feature maybe of being in academia, according to me, based on my experiences, that you get to spend time with a lot of young and creative people in your classes, which keeps you, I think, both on your toes, because they'll ask you all kinds of awkward questions at times, which test your limits of what you know and what you can mentor them with. Sometimes they mentor you as well, maybe in the process, without realizing that they're doing so. But I think that's a big motivator, at least in my case. It has been wherever I went and whichever kind of educational institute I taught in, there were private, public, international, national, undergraduate, postgraduate, PhD, all these. I think without an exception, my students ended up motivating me. So I think that's the unique point number two. Probably it should come at number one. But autonomy and this, I think, in my view, are the two major pluses as far as I see an academic career. I think I'll leave it to other panel members to add to that.
Sure, Professor Rajendra. Yes. Professor Neeraj, any more to add to that list from your experience, or to kind of enrich the other 2 points that were mentioned?
Sure. I think Professor Nargonkar has captured it very rightly. I also would like to share my story as to, again, before answering what is unique in an academic career, I would say why I chose to be into academic. So I think similar to him, I also had no intentions to be an academician, never wanted to be a teacher, though everyone in my family was a teacher, my parents, my sister, my brother. So I went to the engineering way, joined a corporate job, manufacturing company, consulting company. So teaching was never in my mind in the long horizon. Only thing is, it actually is an acquired taste for me. So while being in the corporate, I started doing some training sessions for my subordinates. And sometimes when I was in the consulting company, it was for young entrepreneurs on understanding and spotting business opportunities. So while doing that, again, still I thought I started liking that. But more importantly, 2 years after that, somebody comes back and met me saying that you took that session and that changed my life. So that was possibly the turning point in my life, that people do remember this. Whereas in my corporate office, you keep on working, doing hard work, sometimes nobody recognizes. And this was without any payment. So one of the most important point which I would cherish being an academician is that it's a respected profession, it's a noble profession. I agree to what Professor Nargunkar said. It gives you a lot of autonomy, a lot of flexibility. Work pressure is lesser as compared to corporate office, because I can compare and contrast both, because having worked in both the places. So when you say autonomy and flexibility, flexibility in choosing what you'd like to do, autonomy in choosing your own portfolio of activities which you like doing and which you don't like doing. Also choosing your own goals, that this is what I want to achieve. Nobody pressurizes. The only thing is they give you a bare minimum performance criteria, and beyond that, obviously, you choose your own goals. You can have much tighter goals for yourself. So I would say a lot of fruits of this profession are quite intangible in nature. As I mentioned earlier, the satisfaction of being able to change the lives of people or the students for good. And also I would say there's nothing more satisfying than your students writing back to you 2 years after they've passed out, 5 years after that, 10 years after that, or even sometimes meeting you occasionally at an airport and recognizing you and saying that, sir, you taught this case and I like the way of teaching, etc. I think that's the best reward you can get. So if you like that, obviously that's the career for you. Having said that, it's not, again, pressures are less, work pressure is less, you are having flexibility, but obviously it's also a job for getting it. You have to be a patient, and it requires perseverance, because doing a PhD itself is a bare minimum requirement, and doing a PhD is not an easy task. It drains you out. More importantly, I think in this career, it's very important for you to be constantly updating yourself, keeping it abreast with the latest development in the field. Because as I think that Professor Nargunkar also mentioned, that you will be challenged in your class by the best of the brains in the country. I'm talking about the top level institutions there. And to be able to think as those young generation people, you have to keep yourself updated. You cannot keep teaching them a 1980s or 1990s case and then expect them to relate to that. They'll not be born in that area. So that pressure to constantly upgrade you itself is something. So if you like that, if you want to keep studying, keep learning always, that's a career for you. I think that's what I would like to add to what Professor Nargunkar said. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Professor Neeraj, for those points. Yeah. Professor Tudra, are there any more points you'd like to include to this list?
Yeah, so Professor Neeraj spoke about work pressure being less compared to industry. Now, my experience has been in government. So I used to work for the Reserve Bank of India before coming to academia. And when I was thinking of which direction to take, should I continue in government or go to industry or go to academia, I was clear that I don't want to do a 9-to-5 job. So therefore, I ended up doing a 24/7 job, which is academia. As many people say in academia, you work 7 days a week, but occasionally you have the flexibility to choose which 7 days of the week to work. So, on a more serious note, I think, of course, it is hard work, but at the same time, as Professor Nargunkar said, there is autonomy or there is flexibility. So at least you have flexible timing. So you can choose which time of the day to focus your energies in, which time of the day to do the intellectual work and which time of the day to do the other work. So those flexibilities are there. You get to choose the projects that interest you. So that flexibility is there. Of course, there are tight deadlines, there are challenging deliverables. So the input mix is a choice set, but the frontier is challenging and it has to be constantly pushed. Secondly, the variety of work that we get to do, I think, is mind-boggling. So, of course, research in any area that you want to, teaching any course that you want to. So, I had a professor at the Indian Statistical Institute who told me that he wanted to explore or learn a new area. Therefore, he floated a course in that area. So I thought it's wonderful. As Richard Bach said, you teach best what you most need to learn. So he floated a course in the area he wanted to learn. So I think that flexibility is amazing to be able to teach new courses. You get to influence the literature and set the agenda for the future. You get to influence students, as Professor Neeraj pointed out. And of course, influence practice and influence policy. In the inaugural session earlier today, Professor Tarun Khanna spoke about the academics' role in advocacy. So I think you can do that through your involvement with startups, with government policy work, with consulting work for corporates. And if you get into administrative roles, like some of us, you can also participate in institution building. And lastly, I think the respect that you get from society, from your own friends and relatives, from industry people, the respect that you get by virtue of being in academia is simply amazing. Lastly, the money is also not that bad these days. It used to be really bad in the late 1990s and early 2000s when I started out. But since then, that worry no longer exists. Gopal, your thoughts?
Okay, thanks, Professor Rudra, for that. So I'm kind of going to summarize at the high level and then add a few more pointers to it. So autonomy is definitely one of the key unique aspect of this particular job profile, isn't it? So it's not just autonomy it's autonomy in choosing projects, it's autonomy in what to teach. It's also autonomy in your work schedule. So all of these were touched upon by the panel members and several other friends too. So you end up designing how you want to be known in the next 10 years, or in the upcoming year, and what you want to specialize in and all of it, right? So that autonomy itself is, so you carry, so it's, in other words, what I see in academia is you build a profile of your own, be it in any institute, and you carry it with you wherever you go. It's unlike probably in other setting where you do a job, you probably create a platform, you learn, you have the learnings, but you leave the products that have been developed behind in those settings, and then you move forward to a new job. Here, you're working on yourself, and the universities are providing the ecosystem to help you do that, right? So the institutes are helping you to do that. So autonomy, and then variety of topics that you can focus on, which was again mentioned by the panel members, and then being connected to young minds, which also continues to motivate you to constantly keep updated, be reading new stuff, continue to update. Like, for example, the impact of COVID, all the teaching materials from now on has to get updated for the relevance in the recent setting. So that keeps you also kind of relevant in the conversations and discussions with the students and also practitioners. And the respect, the respect that you earn is again a point that was mentioned by the panel members. And then impact on lives and the satisfaction it offers, impact also on practice, which is through consulting or working with firms, and then impact on policy based on your research, and impact by also institutional building, right? So that's again something that's very unique that is being brought to the table through this profession. And finally, there was work pressure being less, that was mentioned, or which was also updated by Professor Rudra. So I think the work pressure in academic setting is highly self-imposed too. So it's something that you set your benchmarks and then you try to achieve it. And there are a lot of peers that are excellent peers that you work with, and they also kind of keep updating your benchmarks. So the variety in terms of expertise of your peers also keeps it, the engagement with your peers and learning from your colleagues also is one other very unique aspect of this profession. So everyone comes from different walks of life, and they have a variety of experiences, and their research projects are also unique in that sense. So learning from it, getting motivated from it. So there's a lot of interesting conversations that goes on in your day-to-day work life as well, in terms of you get a lot to learn from that conversations too. So that's kind of summarizing what the panel members mentioned. So thanks for those inputs. We move on to the second point. So it's more into the recruitment. So what do academic recruiters look for in potential candidates? Follow-up sub-question to it is, how can one prepare in the early years from PhD days itself to have a promising track record in academia. So we look at from the recruitment perspective and how can they start preparing for it from their PhD days itself. So that's the question. If it is okay, I could request Professor Neeraj to start with this one, and then followed by Professor Rajendra and then Professor Rudra.
Okay, so the question is what recruiters typically look for in a potential candidate when they're trying to recruit. Again, I would go by what we look for. So obviously we look for a consistent academic background. Obviously you cannot do much with that because academic background is history, but I will also focus on what you can do now. So obviously history is history, but at least if you are still doing your PhD, I would say that try to balance out if you have some drawbacks in your earlier career by focusing or by doing some great work in your research. So again, apart from what we look for is a consistent academic background in the candidates which we recruit. We also look for potential to teach at least the core courses in their area, and also a demonstrated potential to develop new electives. It will be good if they are offering electives which are innovative and which are not being offered currently by existing faculty members. So your chances of getting through is much more if you actually are able to do that. We also look for, I think most of us look for, is a demonstrated ability to do independent research. Of course, the research which you do in your PhD is under the guidance of a guide or an academic advisor. So we are not looking at that. We are expecting that you should be able to. So that is obviously gauged by the questions you answer in your seminar. But more importantly, there are certain qualitative things which we look for in a candidate through interview assessment is that you have a desire to learn and constantly learn and upgrade yourself. And obviously have the right attitude, basically saying that you have a passion for teaching and research. So that's what we typically look for. How to prepare for that? Obviously, I would say when you are doing your PhD, the best way to be sure that you're good at teaching is to attend classes of other faculty members who are known to be good teachers, try to learn from them. Try to, while doing your PhD itself, try to come up with an outline based on your research area, as this is the course I would like to pitch in or teach. If you have a ready-made course, if you have a prepared course outline which you're able to present during your seminar and say that I've developed this course and this is what I want to teach and this is linked with my research and draws from my research, that is what you can actually do. So at least basically prepare for a teaching. I think even, of course, we have that provision of FPM students or PhD students. We allow them to handle a few sessions in some running courses. So obviously that also prepares them for that. So you can do that. Yeah, so that's what I would like to, maybe others can add on to what I said.
Professor Rajendra, over to you. Yeah, any points to update
Yeah.
the list that Professor Neeraj mentioned?
I had two stints as Dean, one at IIM Indore recently. Second was at earlier place at Ghaziabad, IMT. And in both, we almost doubled the size of our faculty in about 2 to 3 years' time. So what I would like to say is that sorry, there's a phone ringing, I'll shut it off. Yeah. So first and foremost, we look for a fit with the organization. For example, IMT or an IIM might have one set of criteria based on what they expect from a faculty member. Another kind of institution might have a different priority. For example, teaching could be the priority in some institutions as opposed to research. So it depends on the individual institution. If you're talking of the top 10 or 15, obviously they would look at research probably as one of the top 2 or 3 criteria, at least most that I know of. But there are some which would look for teaching as the primary criterion. So the candidate also needs to be aware, he or she, and then be aware of what their priorities could be. Even in the US, you have teaching universities and research institutions. which focus on one or the other as a primary method of selection. So given that, I would say if you make it to the first cut, which is an invitation to the interview or presentation seminar, the second most important criterion is how you communicate. Simple as that. Meaning that you have to convince a set of people who are sitting there judging you. Everyone is trying to judge you. And in many cases, what happens is there are multiple forces at play. So you have to convince sometimes opposing camps, somebody who may be in favor of hiring you, particularly those who shortlisted you in that area. But there could be some others who might not be very happy with that for whatever reason, and might want to put you to, test you at a higher level. So that seminar presentation where you present your research ideas or research work, plus any other questions that follow, could be any general questions about teaching areas or whatever it is, that you need to communicate effectively and convince people of your capability, plus I would say your suitability for that organization, and in what way you will contribute or add value. For example, there could be an institute where there is a particular subject, let's say digital marketing, which is not being taught currently by anybody existing faculty there, or they're looking for one to teach it. How you can fill that gap may prove to be the clincher, given other things are constant between you and some other people who have been invited to the same seminar. So you have to also play it by the ear, but what I'm saying is you need to be convincing enough to a diverse set of people, and that's not very easy to do. You can take it from me. I've sat through at least 200 seminars in the last 5 to 6 years. So a lot of people flounder at that stage, even though they have impeccable or very good credentials on paper, which is why they've been invited to the seminar. So prepare very well for the seminar, anticipate the kinds of questions that you are likely to get, some hostile and some friendly, both. Be very clear about research methodology, particularly because that's where most of the bulk of the questions come in the seminar, if you're presenting at a top level institution. But teaching fit and personality fit, I would call it, is almost as important, I would say. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Professor Rajendra, for that. Professor Rudra, any more points?
Yeah, so I think it was sufficiently highlighted that it's important to have a good, research and good teaching, signals at least in your CV when you are applying. So let me talk about how do you prepare for it in your early stages in your PhD. So for research, I think start writing papers as early as possible. So my suggestion would be, even in your coursework, if you have done any maybe a term paper or a project as part of a PhD course, try to publish it as a paper, even if that goes into a B category journal or a C category journal, but you learn the skills of how to write and how to get a paper past the reviewers, which will then help you to publish your PhD works. And try to do that as early as possible. So try to get your first paper from your PhD work into an A category journal as early as possible, because it takes a long time, at least in economics and finance areas that I am familiar with, it could take years. So start the publishing game early in your PhD tenure. Secondly, for teaching, not many PhD programs give you the exposure to teaching, and I'm glad that Professor Neeraj said his organization they do. But in the absence of that, I think you need to still try and seek out opportunities to be a teaching assistant or to offer tutorials, maybe pro bono to your juniors, or at least I would give this suggestion that express your teaching interest in your application. So I have sat in many recruitment committees in various IIMs, including ours, where the committee is desperately scanning for the courses in the application which would fit with the requirement, but applicants are very shy to mention the courses they would like to teach. So applicants simply name one or two courses which they are most comfortable. But I think a PhD student should be comfortable teaching any course that you have sat through in your program. So try to express interest in as many courses, compulsory and electives, that you can potentially offer if required. Well, this of course applies to a typical faculty position. There could also be postdoctoral opportunities that you are interested in. So that would require a different kind of investment. So there I would say, other than research, make sure that you know one or two of the latest methodologies in your area. You should excel in some cutting edge methodology, or particularly in quantitative areas or economics and finance. You should be familiar with one or two computer programming languages like Python or R, or at least Data. So that works as a good signal, because in postdoctoral applications, it is all about the fit between what skills you bring and what the project requirement is. Of course, I think Gopal can talk more about the postdoctoral research given his experience during PhD and after PhD. But one more thing to add, I had this interesting experience of first being an assistant professor at an IIM and leaving that to go on and do a postdoc. So I think even that can be done. So, not getting a postdoc immediately after your PhD is not end of the story. You can always seek out opportunities even later on, but it all adds up. So keep building your profile in both research and teaching, and keep making it stronger and stronger, so that when the right opportunity comes, you are ready to grab it. Gopal?
Okay. Thanks for those inputs. So from my end, I see them clustering into three categories broadly, which is also how the job descriptions are explained, isn't it? So teaching, research, and then institutional building or administrative roles. These three broad categories is what you're building your capabilities for. So that when you get into the job, you'll be given responsibilities on these three dimensions, and then you try to satisfy them, right? And each of them are also interconnected. They're not independent. They key in with each other. So what you do for research can become an elective that you offer for students in their second year. So research informs teaching, which is like research-led teaching is what is called. And then teaching interaction with students can give you ideas for questions that can go back to your research projects, right? So for research specifically, I think I would, from my experience and also what I learned from my advisor, Professor Anand, is that early on start participating in conferences. So that's one way where you can meet those deadlines. You can start prepare. You can write your papers, like where you can submit your work in progress work, get feedback from experts, also kind of signal that you are an individual who has started PhD in this particular domain and institution. Get yourself your social capital around, meet people, share ideas, because it's very important in the early stages where we have so many ideas and we're not sure which one to boil down to, right? So what my advisor used to do is he used to create a list of conferences and their deadlines, and then we used to kind of try to say, okay, this idea, let's try to explore, do some write-up, then target to this conference, and then go present it, see what they give us feedback. And all of them became work in papers as we progressed. So and they might not be part of your PhD thesis, but they form your research package, and then they form your research publications as you progress. And that's going to be highly weighted, I think, because you're coming from a PhD program. If you're going to be applying for a teaching position, research is going to be weighed significantly, because that's where you're going to signal how well you perform during your PhD, right? Then along with that, your teaching capabilities is where you could showcase that, okay, I was a teaching assistant for a faculty at my institute. For instance, there used to be a professor in economics, Professor Ladda. So we used to, when I was a FPM and IIM Kozhikode, we used to be a part of the game theory course that was offered as elective for second year students as teaching assistants in our third year of FPM. So you can approach, since IIM has that autonomy, you can approach staff if you like an elective and if you want to learn more about it. Let's say you didn't get time to get in depth into it during your PhD initial coursework days, you can approach them in your third year or fourth year, ask them if you can be part of the course, deliver a few sessions if possible, and also be involved in marking. We learned a lot in how to do marking, what to write, what not to write in the feedback from such a seasoned and expert, very experienced professor. So exploring those opportunities. And because there is autonomy, as it was mentioned in the previous question, professors are also interested in engaging you and also helping you in avoiding some mistakes maybe, and then kind of leapfrogging, I mean, like overcoming certain inhibitions and barriers in that process, right? And then in the institutional building side of it, it might be too early to start with when you're applying at the assistant professor, because you'll be starting after you join the institution. But interacting with your advisor and other staffs, trying to understand what kind of administrative roles they take, what kind of skill sets that it requires, and all of it might be also helpful. So conferences, and then participant kind of trying to get opportunities by interacting with professors to participate in their own electives, and see if you can contribute in terms of grading or also delivering few sessions on certain topics. And obviously by presenting in conferences, you also build that capability as you progress. So those are few things that I found very helpful in the early days. And also, like, when you become a member of these societies and conferences, you keep getting updated in terms of postdoctoral positions, special issues, which also keeps you informed about what's the current relevant topics that are being given importance in this domain that you're working on, right? So yeah. And then doctoral consortiums, participating in that. There are different stages of doctoral consortiums also, where there could be someone who's still not finalized their proposal. There are consortiums for it. There's someone who's going to be in job market in next year. There are also doctoral consortiums for that. So try to keep yourself visible, keep yourself available to discussion in these kind of forums, so that you will be known to others and you learn from others and things like that. Okay, so those are a few points from my end, in addition to the great list of pointers that were made by the panel members. Okay, so moving on, we have 3 more questions and we have close to 20 minutes. I think we should probably make 10 minutes for each of them as we progress. So we'll make it a little quicker. Okay, so the third question is, after taking up career in academia, are there any mantras that can be followed in beginning for successfully satisfying teaching, research, and administrative expectations simultaneously? So I have no experience on this. I would like to hear on all 3 members from this, and how do you manage them? And how do you kind of dedicate your time and still satisfy all 3 expectations? Because to me, they're very competing, because everything is dependent on your availability of time. So I'll start with Professor Rajendra for that. Mantras.
It's difficult to come up with a mantra which is successful in each situation. But I would say go with the institutional priority of whatever institution you first work in. For example, if it's a teaching school, excel at teaching, because that's what you're going to be judged by, at least for the next 1 or 2 years. On the side, you can start, increasing your research slowly, but that's maybe not a priority for everybody. If it's a research-based institution, I would say take time off. Maybe you can talk to the dean or director and take time off from teaching for the first 1 year at least. I mean, not totally take time off. I'm saying reduce the teaching load. Some of the institutions I worked for gave you that flexibility. IIM Indore did, certainly. So it's possible to negotiate maybe a research focused first couple of years. And I think increasingly some of the other IIMs like Bangalore and so on, they are going in for a Western style tenure system, where they first give you some 3 years or whatever time in which you're expected to publish 1 or 2 top journal articles. And there it's maybe also understood that you cannot teach at the full course load. Your approach to the mix between teaching and research. Research is
Professor Rajendra, we are losing you in between.
But okay, maybe some problem with the internet.
Okay,
am I audible?
Stable now. Yeah, it's
okay. So yeah, I got a message saying it's unstable for a minute.
Okay.
So I would say you balance it according to the needs of the institution that you work for, and of course keeping the long term in view. In case you wish to change the kind of institution, the type of institution that you're going to be working for in the future. If your aspiration is to go somewhere else, which has a different set of priorities, then obviously you need to keep that bridge open. But you have to first satisfy your criteria for, let's say, a confirmation of your probation in the institute that you work in. For example, in some institutions, teaching, let's say, 4 to 5 courses is mandatory. And that is what people will judge you by at the end of year 1. So in such a case, you have to excel at your teaching first and then do everything else. Whereas the opposite holds true in some other places where you'll only be judged by your research output, maybe at the end of 2 years or whatever. So in that case, your approach has to be different. The balance has to change based on where you're going, where you are. And I would say, except that, keep these in mind. Keep your current tenure, probation, whatever it is that you need to fulfill, obligations to the first employer or the early employer in mind. Do excel at that, and keep the other one as a second priority, which also you have to be decent or good at.
Okay. Thanks, Professor Rajendra, for that. Professor Neeraj, do you like to add any points to it?
Yeah, I would like to keep it short for the want of time. But again, I'm also not a great fan of mantras. I'm of the believer that something which works for one individual doesn't work for another individual. So there can't be a universal mantra which works for all. Further, I think you have mentioned 3 pillars of expectations which an academician management teacher has. Teaching, research, and administration. I would add one more pillar. Generally, what we are supposed to do is also training and consulting. Of course, that doesn't come early on in your career. But one mantra from me here would be that don't try to excel in all those 4. Because I've seen people trying to excel in all 4 and then ultimately ending up being mediocre or average in all. I came across, in fact, long back when I was doing my FPM, I came across this HBS article or HBR article somewhere in early 2000s, which was titled T-shaped managers. Basically, managers who excel in one functional area and have reasonable understanding of other functional areas as well. So I would say try to become a T-shaped academician. Play on your strengths. If you have a potential to do very good research, focus on research, be an excellent researcher, and maybe do what is just required in the 3 compartments. If you think that you are a star performer in teaching, try to play on your strength, be a good teacher, hone it further, and then try to do at least what bare minimum required for others. So this is what I would like to say. And also, research is not an individual effort. So early on in your career, start building networks. Start doing cross-functional collaborative research, sometimes with people within your area, sometimes people who are in related areas. So for example, if you work in corporate governance, you can have people from economics area, people working in finance area. And if you are a strategy person, try to do those linkages and try to work on that. So this is what I would like to very shortly talk about.
Okay. Thanks, Professor Neeraj, for that. Professor Rudra, any more points to the list?
Yeah, I think I agree with all of the points. So I'll just add one more, which is try to have an academic mentor at the place that you are working in, which is typically a senior colleague. So it could start off as a research collaboration, but it could also develop into receiving advice on how to negotiate the teaching and administration issues within the organization, because as a senior faculty, he or she will have suggestions which would help you. So I think I have benefited from that, by working with senior colleagues. So you of course get the benefit of research collaboration. As Professor Neeraj said, it could be cross area research also. So it's good to go beyond your PhD guide or your PhD research and have new collaborators, and also get guidance on what kind of courses to teach, what are the things to do or not to do in the classroom or while taking up consulting or administration or training projects. So yeah, so that would be my advice.
Okay. Thanks for those amazing pointers for this particular question. Only thing here from my end that I've experienced, like in this initial 3 to 4 years now, is so PhD is primarily just training us to do research, isn't it? So it's the starter, and then we continue to do research after that throughout. So it would be useful if you also try to get the capabilities of teaching from early on. So then when you really start teaching, you would have traveled and earned certain capabilities by then, so that you can at least reduce the amount of weightage that you're giving to research at that point, not stop it completely. So, because after PhD is when your real papers are going to come out. But if you continue to get the capabilities of teaching when you're doing PhD, you can be confident that you can deliver those electives or courses that you've offered. At the same time, also allocate some time for your research to get those papers out. Completely switching off research at the time because you are getting into teaching for the first time at that time would be acting detrimental probably to make progress in the subsequent years. Because there's a saying that any done thesis is a good thesis. It's the papers that come out of thesis that will make the difference of you as a researcher, right? So ensure that you also convert those papers along with your other additional responsibilities of teaching and admin roles if that comes along your way. Okay, so that's very nice. And the next question, which is kind of something that I want to learn a lot on. So what are the traps one should escape or avoid in their early years to have a successful career in academia? So from experienced academicians like you, so you might have avoided, or you would have been in a trap like that, which you kind of want to advise us to avoid. So any of those ones, like what are the traps that the one should escape or avoid in their early years? Professor Neeraj, from your interest.
Okay, I would not tell you that whether I got into that trap or avoided that, but I'll let you know a few of them. So one, as I said, training and consulting gives you a lot of money. Don't get sucked into that circle early on in your career. I think early PhD days are the best days to build on your research. Don't stop that, because starting something which you stopped, starting afresh takes a lot of time. Even administration, try to say no to something. So basically saying that have your career goals clear in your mind, and if someone says that do this MDP session, take this admin role, I think I think big institutes give you that flexibility to say no. So you have to clearly say that this is my career goals and it doesn't fit into that. So try to say no to that. Obviously, it's unpleasant for your boss. It might be difficult in a private company, but yes, in IIMs, you have that flexibility to give people to decide what they want to do, and you can politely say no to what you don't want to do. One thing about teaching, try to develop your own teaching methodology or identify what you're good at. Initial years, you can experiment what works for you and then gradually establish in a year or two. I mentioned earlier that sitting in some well-respected faculty's classes is a good way to learn teaching. But at the same time, don't try to emulate someone. Some style which works for someone may not work for you. Maybe he cracks very good jokes. If you try cracking jokes, it may not come naturally to you. And it may work the other way around. And nobody may laugh. So don't try to do something which you are not good at. In research, my suggestion would be that don't get into the practice of plucking low-hanging fruits. Professor Nargunkar also mentioned that. I had slightly different view. You might have pressures on confirmation, pressures on promotion, and sometimes just to meet that requirement, we say that even my paper has a potential to be published in a good journal, but that good journal takes time. It takes 1 year or 2 years. I'm tempted to send it to a lower level journal or lower category journal, which gives a better turnaround time. But problem with that is once you are stereotyped with, say, people will say that this person writes paper in such kind of journal, which again, you would not like to build that image early on in life. And again, why I'm saying is academic career is a very, very long career. Most of you would get into an academic career in the management institute at around the age of 30 or so. Most of us become professors at the age of 40, 45. And again, this is a career where you have two promotions. You join as an assistant professor, you'll become associate, you'll become professor. There's no promotion after that. So if you become a professor at 40, 45, there are still 20, 25 years left and there's nothing to do. So again, even if it delays your promotion or confirmation by a couple of years, it doesn't matter. Don't compromise on your papers just to get a faster turnaround time. It applies to teaching as well. So don't, sometimes your institute would say that you would be confirmed if you get this kind of teaching feedback, student feedback. Don't try to resort to strategies which will buy you feedback by trying to please students. It may work, but then student memory is also long. Once you give an image to one batch that you are a liberal professor, you allow people attendance, you allow them to come late, you will give them very good marks, that image will continue for you for the rest of your life. It's very difficult to change that perception. So don't get into that trap. And this is the kind of traps which I won't say I got into that or I evaded them, but these are some of the traps which I know of. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor Neeraj. I could relate to a lot of them as a student also when we were looking at professors. So like the transfer of messages across batches is so powerful. You can never break it. So I think it's very important to set the standards up front in the beginning itself.
Yeah, and just a small thing, it's a very, very small, this academic community is a very, very small community. And we say that your reputation travels faster than you. So I think you don't even get known in your institute about doing something. You are known in other institutes also that
there are pagal guys around.
Pardon?
There are pagal guys around.
Rajendra, your viewpoints on this?
I just want to add one thing, maybe related to what Neeraj just said. Don't avoid research and don't do too much of teaching in the first year or two. That's all.
Okay. Thanks. That's a very important point, and I think that has a lot of meaning within and the trap that many of us also experience. Professor Rudra.
Yeah. So Professor Neeraj said that don't say yes to everything. Learn to say no. So it's hard for some people to say no. I always find it very hard. So here's a tip. So when there's an urge to say yes, because you don't want to displease the other person, hold back and say, I will think about it and get back to you. So that buys you some time. So if there is excess teaching being given to you, or you are being drawn into some collaborative research that you don't want to do, and you are not able to say no, just say, I'll think about it. And then later on, you could come up with an excuse. Related to that would be, yeah, sometimes it's hard to say no, because Professor Nargunkar earlier talked about teaching-based institute and research-based institute. The problem is research-based institutes want you to teach and teaching-based institutes want you to publish. So there's no escape. So probably I think signaling can help. So if you signal that where your interest lies and probably volunteer for certain things, then that perception might help you that this person is interested in doing this kind of activity. So you get slotted. So sometimes volunteering and signaling could save you the trouble of doing too many things that you don't want to do.
Okay. Very interesting point in terms of the school's expectations. Even though they call themselves a teaching school, they might want you to still publish. And if they call themselves a research school, they still want you to excel in teaching, which goes back to the point that the panel members mentioned, that there's no mantra, and also it's impossible to succeed in all 4 points, right? But that's when you submit your package for promotion, that's when those incomplete pointers are being raised, and then they ask you to fill those pointers to move on to the next stage, isn't it? So even though we all agree that it's kind of impossible, or there's always a trade-off that has to be sought, but there is always a push to also excel and go beyond what you can achieve, isn't it? So which is the kind of profession, again, that's unique about this profession too. So the goalposts can tend to move depending upon who's reviewing your package and also the institution that you're at. Okay, and one other thing with respect to trap that I wanted to state here is, so everything at least in this profession has 2 sides to it. Like take autonomy. it gives you a lot of freedom to what you want to do, but at the same time, it can end up introducing you to a lot of inefficiencies too, because if you, let's say you start too many things at one time, and also collaborating with too many people as soon as you finish your PhD, which is usually very tempting, because you just got out of PhD, you want to start and work on too many things and too many ideas, and then it might be difficult. So like Professor Rudra mentioned, having a mentor early on for research and for teaching will definitely help to avoid those traps, because they'll be really invested in you and will help you, and kind of learning from them, not imitating them, learning from them and trying to see what works for you, what doesn't, and taking it forward from there. So and also the PhD program is giving you all those signals. Like you'd meet different personalities, you meet different colleagues, you want to see, okay, this is the kind of profile that I want to build as I progress. You can create amalgamations or hybridizations of different profiles and say, okay, this is the kind of profile that I want to build, and I want myself to position and become visible as I progress, right? So interesting. So good to know that. And last question, and then we are slightly over time. So, but there are a few Q&As that have been already made available on chat box. We'll try to get through that in the process. But quickly for the last question, given that all of you have more than a decade or close to 2 decades of experience in academia, just one piece of advice you'd like to share with early career researchers who are beginning their academic career. So only one piece of advice that you want to summarize what you've based on all the explanations that you've offered so far. It's difficult, but I think it's useful as a takeaway message for the participants. So Professor Rajendra, from you first.
Okay, I would strongly suggest that you learn how to relax. In the sense that you get caught up so much in deadlines or teaching evaluations or whatever, research, the tension before you get an acceptance or a revision or whatever. So learn to relax is my, if you want to call it a mantra, you can call it that. Okay. But you can have a hobby, or you can do some socializing on a regular basis, whatever catches your fancy, but learn also to relax and enjoy your life, because otherwise you become like a corporate or like a robot. Only Rajnikant can do a successful robot act. So thanks, that's it.
Okay, thanks Professor Rajendra. So Neeraj, from your end? I know you don't like mantras, but use this as kind of a summary statement.
Piece of advice, I would say, try to work in a direction that you are known as an expert in a specific area of research. So don't wander in too many directions. Very soon you'll be approached by a research scholar saying that, take me as a guide, I work in this area. You tempt to take those students because there are research outputs there, even though he's not working in the area where you like. So for example, what I'm saying is try to let people know that this is your area and this is what you're known for. You are a supply chain expert, you're a green supply chain expert, you work in the area of corporate governance. Don't try to spread yourself too thin. I think that will be one. Although you may have knowledge of others, but I think you may be known to be in your own area as an expert in this specific area.
Okay, thanks, Professor Neeraj. Professor Rudra?
Yeah, so earlier we said that learn to say no, but there could be situations when you can't and you have to do something that you didn't want to. So my suggestion would be, when you have to do something, do it very well. So don't do things half-heartedly. So even if you are given a course to teach that you didn't want to teach, but make sure that generations hence will remember what you taught. If you were given an admin duty which you didn't want to do, but once you are doing it, leave behind your mark. Similarly for research, I mean, if you are doing a paper, make sure that you are targeting high quality. I mean, 1 or 2 A category papers are worth more than 20 C category papers. So go for quality rather than quantity. As one of my professors had told me, and pardon my French, don't do shit and don't get involved in shit.
Thanks, Professor Rudra, for that. So from my end, I think there's not one piece of advice, but I would strongly recommend you to read this book that says The Slow Professor. So several of the points that have been discussed in this discussion are also kind of mentioned or kind of discussed in terms of how autonomy is leading you to make trade-offs between. So it's an amazing book to look at. So once again, the title of the book is The Slow Professor. So take a look at it for all the participants who are getting into the academic career. Okay, so that's it from the structured or moderated discussion side of it. So I'm going to take a look at the questions. There have been several questions from the beginning. Firstly, it was Vijay Shankar. The question was, what suggestions or recommendations would the panelists give to crossover academicians? I'm referring to individuals who switch to research after a long stint with corporate. So any experiences that you would like to share? Anyone from the panel member who wants to volunteer for this question?
Yes, I can try to attempt that. I think I am a crossover academician, but not too many years of experience. Professor Nargunkar also is a crossover academician. I would say if you have a long years of experience, leverage that experience in your teaching. Don't try to compete with other researchers who are fresh researchers, fresh PhD graduates, and are much more quantitatively sounder than you. I think so. Play on your strengths, bring industry experience, write cases, use your industry linkages to enrich your classes, and also do research which is in that direction.
Okay, thanks, Professor Neeraj. Anything else to add to this, Professor Rajendra or Professor Rudra?
I would just say that in case you're aiming at the top institutions, learn the language of research, which is very, very different from corporate language or whatever other language, that we typically use elsewhere, because academics is very highly focused on complex terminology, methodology, and the like these days. In fact, many of the marketing journals look like mathematics journals sometimes, rather than pure marketing. So the language of research is something that one has to learn and adapt yourself to, in case you're aiming at the top 15, 20 kind of research led or I would say research focused institutions in academia these days.
Okay. Thanks, Professor Rajendra, for that. Professor Rudra, any points from your end? No. Okay, cool. So there was also a follow-up question, Amitava Ghosh. I think this answer to the question that was just raised just now, so is fitting to that question. And what weightage is attributed to corporate experience in academia? I think this is more from a recruitment perspective, I guess. Like, let's say if someone has few years of corporate experience and then has done a PhD, the weightage attributed to corporate experience in academia.
I would like to just say one small thing here. Mm-hmm. I would reverse that question and say, suppose you are a pure academician and you apply for a corporate job, where would you begin? I think the answer is obvious.
Anyone who wants to take a try?
No, but I think, yeah, this was my question. This is Mangesh. Yeah. So yes, sir, I think you put it very rightly that if somebody from academia comes to corporate, then obviously the expectation should be the same. That yes, we are starting somewhere, maybe from scratch, not from scratch, but yes, you certainly have something which you can encash on and you can leverage on. So that should be fine.
Just to add on to what Professor Nargunkar has said, so it doesn't also mean that we don't welcome people with good corporate experience to come and deliver lectures there. You may be invited as, again, I don't know what's your condition, but if you've done a PhD, a lot of IIMs have started the concept of professor of practice. So obviously we know that a person doing a PhD at a late stage in their career would not be a star performer in research. So your research expectations may be lower, but your teaching and industry to consulting and your expectations from you would be more focused on consulting, training, and teaching rather and lesser. We won't expect you to come up with an FT50 or an A-star publication, but yeah, a lot of IIMs have started valuing that experience and also trying to get those kind of faculty members there.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so the next question is. How do you look the teaching as a profession from the perspectives of contractual faculties, as these days education sector is focusing more on contractual nature of appointment where less opportunities and no incentives are given to them on research? So
So just to add to that earlier point which Neeraj was making, we have the concept of professors of practice now in at least 3 or 4 IIMs. And actually these tend to be contractual positions, not tenure track positions, which means basically that it's a clinical professor. In some places they call it clinical professor, where they do not expect you to do academic research and publication like the tenure track faculty. But the trade-off is that it is a contractual position, and it could be that your teaching load is higher, or you're expected to contribute more in terms of consulting or MDP, which is executive programs teaching, or administration even. So there could be certain differences in the kind of expectations that an institution has from the pure academician coming in. Yeah, I think my connection is going, so I'll stop here.
Okay. Sorry for that, Professor Rajendra. Yeah, Professor Neeraj, any points for this one on the contractual?
I really don't understand what the question is.
Shruti, if you're available, you can unmute and also kind of raise it or explain it further for us.
Yeah,
if
but
she's not there,
yeah, I mean, my quick point would be it's a matter of choice. So you would take up a contractual appointment provided you are comfortable with the deal that you are being given, which could typically be more teaching and less research. But if you are interested in moving on to a more regular track role, then you find time to get at least a paper or two so that you can move on to a regular profile. So it's a choice that you have, and you need to decide what you want to do.
And one can use that contractual position or period also to develop their teaching skills, or even start doing some research and apply for a regular position later on. I think that could be.
Yeah. One other point that came up to me for the suggestions for someone who's coming from practice into academia is also collaboration. So you have a rich set of experience that you're bringing to the table in how things work in reality. And when there are already researchers in the institution in which you're joining, so try to get into a conversation with them to see if you could benefit from their expertise and methodology on the data or the questions that you have, and then run some analysis on it. And then in that process, you also learn how research terminologies or research paper writing is, review process are, and things like that. Obviously, you would have done that in PhD. That could continue also once you start your academic career, when you join in the new institute. So I think the bridge could be more enjoyable, or the switch could be more enjoyable if that collaboration is rightly struck in the initial days. Okay. So then, okay, the contractual one is having zero teaching experience a disadvantage, considering if you have a good A-level publications. My immediate response to that is no. It's I think teaching experience when you're applying at the starting level is desirable, and if you exhibit at least your interest towards it will be useful. But any additional points from Professor Neeraj or Professor Rajendra?
Yeah, it's a definite no. I don't think there is any disadvantage which you have, and probably, obviously, since you're a very good researcher, we are not looking for teaching experience, but we are looking at potential to teach. So we judge your potential to teach, ability to answer questions based on your interview and seminar performance. So in no way it's a disadvantage.
As I said earlier, I think it's important to communicate your interest and your abilities, which can overcome the lack of teaching experience. So I have been on interview panels where a candidate was so articulate in explaining his or her research and expressed interest in teaching a wide number of courses that the particular candidate was preferred over others who had teaching experience. So I think if you can convince the panel, then there is no issue.
Okay. Okay. The follow-up question is, what is the impact on career if one has changed domains drastically, say from design in bachelor's to supply chain in PhD? Okay, so I want to quickly respond to this one and then open it to the panel. So I have a bachelor's in biomedical engineering, and then I moved to a FPM program in IMK. So think it's how you connect them and how you draw relevance between those domains also plays a role, and it's not going to be any way disadvantageous. You can try to make it relevant by connecting them. If not, that experience can be left alone, and then you can start with the new experience of delving into supply chain. For instance, I had my bachelor's in biomedical engineering, and then I started looking at, in my research was focusing on healthcare sector itself, because I wanted to keep my touch with hospitals and healthcare institutions that I had experience during my PhD days. So that's one way that linkage could be established, if possible, when you go forward. But any points or any feedback on from the panel members on the impact on career if one has changed domains drastically?
Sometimes you are in luck. I mean, you could be, for example, in an emerging area like technology related areas, which are sort of gaining a little bit of attention or traction. So for example, in marketing, I think if you have come in with some experience of, let's say, anything digital, it could actually prove to be a plus point. Similarly, maybe in other areas as well. So something that is trending or about to trend, and you happen to be from that area of industry or practice or whatever, I think it can prove to be a plus point. Otherwise, you have to work harder to make that connect. I mean, connect in the sense with what you are likely to teach, etc. So it could work both ways.
Okay, and any more points from Professor Neeraj or Professor Rudra? Okay, one other pointer to add there is, like, for instance, there are a lot of applications that's being received, at least at the university that I'm in here, is students who have bachelor's in computer science and then have done PhD in data mining or data analytics related aspects, and then applying for big data analytics related programs as a faculty at the school. So how you link that switch is going to play an important role. If they're very discrete, then they're kind of not fitting in with each other, isn't it? So that it will be useful to think on those lines to see how you link that. Okay, so how do you maintain connection with what is it that interests the industry? Okay, so experienced panel members, I think that question is coming from research and teaching, maybe. So how do you maintain the connection of research and teaching with that interest the industry?
I think there are multiple ways to do it. So one is to, after establishing your initial whatever, research credentials, teaching credentials, I think you can get into teaching executives, either in a long-term executive program, if you have one, or in the MDP, if you have those. So either of these, we have, for example, at NM Bangalore, our flagship program initially was the weekend executive program, with which we started in the city, and then we have now moved into the regular MBA. Same was the case in Kirloskar Institute, where I taught for several years. We started with MDP teaching, and that's a completely different experience, where you learn equally, I mean, from executives. So I think that's one way to do it. Depends on the opportunities available, I guess.
Okay. Any other approaches to achieve this?
Yes, agree to that. I think one good way of that is start teaching into executive programs, if not full courses, at least taking sessions that will get to interact with them. Also, one other approach would be to write a few cases where I think get to interact with some industry people in more depth and more detail.
Yeah, I agree.
Another different approach could be to look out for funding, funded research projects, because sometimes the funding agencies would set priorities that are related to industry or government, which could then be aligned with your research, and you learn to solve real problems.
Okay. And one other thing that I've found it to be useful is also to see if you can collaborate with the organization for your research, and then you continue that collaboration for a longer period of time in the process, where you write probably a teaching case study on them, because you have seen them transforming into stages and you have seen them solving dilemmas You can also write cases on them, and that will also be the data that you gather in the process is also going to be used for your research. So that goes back to the initial point of research, teaching, and knowledge exchange being very much connected and keying into each other, right? So, okay, so I think Gaurav has posed a question, but slightly not very much linked to the theme of this panel. I'll kind of park it for now, then come back to it if we have time, or if you want.
Somebody has raised his hand. I think Anil.
Yes, Anil has raised his hand, and then there's a question from Mega. Okay, over to you, Anil, first. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. It was a wonderful discussion. My question, particularly not related to early career in academia. My question relates to those who are in mid-career, particularly in state universities, who are facing crises on many fronts, such as decreasing quality of the students. The main aim is just to fill the seats. Even that is an injustice with the students, because they do not have, many of the students do not have the aptitude or the attitudes for these professional courses. One thing is this. Second, there is crisis in terms of mentorship and limited research facility. And some teachers, they are in dilemma. What can they do? Actually, just, to take the example, we in our university, we deal with about 220 students in a semester, and we have very limited facilities. But although we are in A grade state universities, but on the ground reality, we face many crises. And sir, any suggestions so that we can do some kind of contribution in terms of research? But we do not have control over the situation, so that we cannot have a check whether the right candidates, right students are admitted or not. And later we found that we are also making sometimes injustice with the students, because many of the students came from rural area in Haryana, government schools. They do not know what will be the implications of pursuing these courses. So any suggestion, although it is not related directly to this discussion, but I will be thankful if you kindly give something.
I think it's a question of focusing on what you can control. Basically, self-development is something that you can control. So you can get better at teaching, you can get better at research, maybe collaborate with other people and learn from them who are in a different kind of an institution. Attend a faculty development program, for example, or conduct one at your own institution. All these kinds of things can help. Bring guest lecturers from industry who can probably bring in some new perspectives to both the students as well as your own self. So I think you can focus on many of these things no matter where you are.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the question. Thank you. So the last one from Mega is, how does one start consulting as an academician? What is the best path?
I can share my experience. So in two organizations, in one organization, when I wanted to get involved in consulting, I simply walked into the office of a senior colleague and said that, look, I know you are involved in many projects. Would you like me to join you in any of these? And I ended up working with him not only in consulting, but also in academic papers, and then learned to do independent consulting projects. Second organization, I wanted to get involved in MDP teaching. And I just figured out who is the senior faculty member who does a lot of MDP teaching, which is kind of aligned with my interest. Once again, I picked up the phone and asked for an appointment and said that I would love to do some MDP teaching with you. And I had a great learning experience and ended up teaching those programs independently later on. So it's related to my previous point about academic mentors, but basically try and reach out and volunteer yourself, and you then end up learning and contributing on your own.
Technically speaking, there are two ways you can get consulting. One is that you get it through the institution. That means somebody approaches your institute and says that we have this consulting project, and then it it is opened up for people who might want to bid for it or might want to send a proposal. So you can volunteer for such opportunities if your institute works that way. Second is that you go out and get it yourself. Consulting from somebody who's known to you, for example, or somebody who you have worked with in the past, for example. So those are more difficult ways, perhaps, for some of us to do it. But for the institutional one, definitely you can volunteer either alone or in partnership with some colleague and try to get a breakthrough that way.
Yeah, I think I would just add on to that. For you to be able to get consulting assignments, you have to demonstrate that you have a deep expertise in the area and the person values it. Again, early on in your career, it will be difficult. I think, to be very frank, it will be difficult for you to get that because they won't expect a fresh PhD to be an expert in something, and they generally discount that. So one good way of entering this area would be to get into collaboration with someone who has done it, and then try to be an assistant to that faculty member, senior faculty member. Through that, develop contacts and then demonstrate that and gradually build up with more. Thank you.
Thanks. And again, a network and social capital plays a significant role also in how we convert these. And I think that has to be taken into account. Okay. So the question from Gaurav, if I can just tweak it slightly to make it relevant for the panel, right? So how to handle rejections from academic institutions after giving seminars, and or how to learn from it and move forward? Are there any kind of approaches that the early career researchers could adopt in efficiently handling these rejections?
One short answer, it's not exactly on rejection, but I think it's very important to find out the fit between what you're doing and what journal you're submitting it to. Not all journals would look for major contributions to theory. So look for what work you have done and what will be the best avenue for publishing that. And for that, I think you will do a reasonable amount of homework to understand what kind of papers that journal publishes. Obviously, if journal is demanding contribution to theory, you cannot say that I will submit something which doesn't have contribution to theory. So I think it's very important to look at what will be the right avenues for the work which you have actually done and make sure that it actually fits into their scheme of things.
Yeah. And there's also a panel, Gaurav, which is on editors are sharing their experiences of avoiding desk rejections in the conference itself. So you could also try to attend that one. But I was just tweaking the question to see how academicians who are submitting or attending these seminars for recruitment, how can they handle rejections from institutions for the applications they have made?
Yeah, I think typically you should expect that not every seminar invitation that you get will convert. But I think handling rejection, the only way is to prepare yourself better, apply to institutions which appear to have a need for your skills set, whatever that might be, or the area of teaching in some cases. For example, through networking, you may come to know that somebody is looking for a faculty in a specific area in finance or marketing or strategy or whatever, and they have a dire need. Your chances of converting that would be much better. So you keep your ears to the ground for the next opportunity and prepare yourself better than what you did for the first one where you got rejected.
Just a quick add-on, I think use it as a learning opportunity and try to understand where you went wrong, what didn't work for you, and try to improve on that in the next application.
Specifically on Gaurav's question, I would say that sometimes the editors, simply did not like your paper, and we need not always take it too seriously what they are saying about the lack of theory, because that is one of the generic rejection reasons that they give. So the problem could be somewhere else. So along with what Professor Neeraj said, try to find out where the weakness lies, or try some other journal. To the larger point that Gopal raised, I think as academics we need to develop a thick skin, whether it is in research or it is in the job market. So have a thick skin. Don't take rejection seriously. In fact, the rejection may not be always a reflection on your abilities, but it could be simply because of a lack of fit. And related to that would be that keep trying don't give up. Somebody told me once when I was in the UK that you need to make 50 job applications. It's so competitive in order to convert to one. So just keep trying and never give up, be persistent.
And the other thing is there are also different stages of rejections that needs to be taken into account. If you're rejected at the application stage without getting invitation, then there's something that you need to work on your application and probably build onto it before you resubmit it again, because you're wasting your time and also the institution's time who are reviewing it. Right? And then if you're getting rejected after the seminar, then your profile on paper is good. They've invited you because that was ticking all the boxes. There is something that you need to fix in your presentation and in your delivery of seminar and responding to questions and things like that. So that's the stage where you need to invest more onto, right? And again, there is a lot of takeaways just by giving the seminar. Even if you're rejected, you're building your connections. Like a friend of mine from US school used to say that he's working on research projects to those institutions where he went for job talks, and so there are collaborators from those institutions with whom he is co-authoring papers and things like. So you tend to meet people, you tend to get into a conversation with them, and you build social capital, even if you're not joining those institutions in the future, but you have your linkages established with those institutions. And as academicians in the entire career, one thing that's going to constantly remain is rejections. So be it from journals, be it from promotion packages, or be it from applications to other institutes and things like that. So it's very important to take it in the right spirit and also see how we can learn from it and just move forward. And there could be also several other reasons for rejections. Like it just doesn't mean that the application or you as a candidate are weak or whatever. It could be lack of fit, like it was mentioned in journals. Similarly, there are lack of fit with the role that's being floated for. So don't take it, I think from my experience, don't take it too personally. See if there's anything that you, in a self-evaluation, if there's anything that you could improve, if there is any gap that you can bridge, and if there was any very relevant and very, very important feedback that was provided, try to work on it and move forward. I think that's probably it. And I think we're on time, 1 minute beyond 90 minutes. So that's a great thing. And thank you so much to the panel members for sharing those rich experiences. I think I learned a lot in the process, and I'm kind of also talking in front on behalf of all the participants in the session. There were a lot of unique experiences that were shared. And I think the most important thing about panel discussion are the panel members itself. It's their experiences that make the panel discussion and elevates it to a different level, and thereby enables us to learn, all of us to learn from it. So I sincerely thank you all for your time, all three panel members, and also for those great insights. And also thanks to the participants for sticking along with us throughout the session. It's almost 8 in India and from wherever you're joining. But thanks to all of you, and enjoyed moderating this session. And good luck with any endeavors that come up in your way. So take care. Bye-bye.
All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gopal, for steering the conversation.